It was a typical Saturday evening. I had just settled down on the couch with a cup of tea, enjoying the quiet after a long, busy week. My husband Daniel was out of town for work, so the house felt unusually still. I scrolled through my phone, catching up on messages and updates from friends. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. I frowned, glancing at the clock. It was already past 9 p.m. Who could be visiting at this time? My curiosity piqued. I set my cup down and headed toward the door. When I opened it, I was surprised to see Ethan, my best friend Claire's son, standing there. He was only 21, but carried himself like someone older, with an air of confidence that made him seem mature beyond his years. "Ethan?" I said, surprised. "What are you doing here so late?" Ethan smiled awkwardly, running a hand through his dark hair. "Hi, Aunt Lily. I was just in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by. Is that okay?" I hesitated for a moment, but I had known Ethan since he was a child. He was like family to me. "Of course, come in," I said, stepping aside to let him in. Ethan walked in, glancing around the living room before sitting on the couch. "Is Uncle Daniel home?" "No, he's out of town for work," I replied, sitting down across from him. "So what brings you here, Ethan? It's been a while since we've talked." He shrugged, avoiding eye contact. "I don't know. I guess I just wanted to see you. It's been a rough week." There was something about his tone that felt off, but I didn't want to pry. Ethan had always been a bit of a mystery, even to his own mother. Claire often joked that she never knew what was going on in her son's head. "Well, I'm glad you stopped by. You know you're always welcome here," I said with a smile. But little did I know, that night would turn my life upside down. We talked for a while about everything and nothing, how his classes were going, how his mother was doing, and even a bit about Daniel's work. But as the conversation went on, I noticed Ethan getting more comfortable. Maybe too comfortable. He leaned back on the couch, his eyes lingering on me in a way that made my stomach twist. It was subtle at first, but then his gaze became more intense, like he was studying me. I shifted in my seat, feeling suddenly self-conscious. "Are you okay, Ethan? You seem a little off tonight." He smiled, but it wasn't the friendly, boyish smile I was used to seeing. This smile felt different, calculated. "I'm more than okay, Aunt Lily. In fact, I've been thinking about you a lot lately." My heart skipped a beat, and I felt a strange sensation wash over me. "Thinking about me?" I asked, my voice shaky. He nodded, leaning forward, his eyes locked on mine. "Yeah, you've always been so good to me, and I've always thought you were beautiful." I froze. This wasn't the playful compliment I might have brushed off in the past. There was something in his tone that felt heavy, almost dangerous. "Ethan, what are you talking about?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He didn't back down. Instead, he moved closer, sitting on the edge of the couch next to me. "You know what I mean, Aunt Lily. I'm not a kid anymore. I've noticed the way you look at me sometimes, and I think you've noticed me too." I stood up quickly, my heart racing. "Ethan, stop. This isn't funny." But he didn't stop. He stood up too, his eyes never leaving mine. "I'm not joking, Aunt Lily. I want you. I've wanted you for a long time." I backed away, feeling the walls close in on me. This couldn't be happening. Ethan, the boy I had watched grow up, was standing in front of me, saying things I never expected to hear. "Ethan, you need to leave," I said, my voice firm. But he didn't move. He just stood there, looking at me like I was prey. In that moment, I didn't know what to do. Part of me was furious, but another part of me was flattered. I hated to admit it, but there was something about the way he looked at me that stirred something inside me. It was wrong, so wrong, but I couldn't deny the tension in the room. "Ethan, please," I whispered, my voice betraying the confusion I felt. He stepped closer, his hand reaching out to touch mine. His touch was gentle, but it sent a jolt through me. "You don't have to pretend anymore," he whispered, his face inches from mine. "I know you feel it too." I pulled my hand away, shaking my head. "No, Ethan, this is wrong. You're Claire's son, my best friend's son. I can't." But before I could finish, he leaned in and kissed me. For a split second, I didn't move. I was too shocked, too caught off guard. But then reality hit me like a ton of bricks, and I pushed him away, my heart pounding in my chest. "Ethan, stop! You have to go now!" He looked at me, his eyes full of frustration and hurt. "I thought you wanted this." "No, Ethan, I don't. You need to leave before this goes any further." For a moment, he just stood there, his face hardening. But then, slowly, he nodded and turned toward the door. "I'm sorry," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. As he left, I sank onto the couch, my hands trembling. What just happened? How did things get so out of control? The next morning, I woke up with a heavy heart. The events of the previous night played over and over in my mind. How could I have let things get so far? I knew I had done nothing wrong, but the guilt gnawed at me. Ethan had crossed a line, but had I encouraged him in some way? Was there something I could have done to stop it before it escalated? I didn't know what to do. I couldn't tell Claire. How could I? This was her son, the boy she loved more than anything. Telling her would destroy her. But keeping it to myself felt like a betrayal. I spent the day in a daze, unable to focus on anything. Every time my phone buzzed, I jumped, afraid it might be Ethan. But the hours passed, and there was no sign of him. No texts, no calls, just silence. By the time Daniel came home that evening, I had convinced myself that I could forget about it. Pretend it never happened. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. The memory of Ethan's words, his touch, lingered in the back of my mind, haunting me. A week later, I ran into Claire at the grocery store. She greeted me with her usual warm smile, but I could barely look her in the eye. "Lily, are you okay? You seem off," she said, concern etched on her face. I forced a smile. "I'm fine, Claire. Just a little tired, that's all." But I wasn't fine. I felt like a fraud standing in front of her, pretending everything was normal when I was keeping such a huge secret. As we stood there chatting, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, glancing at the screen. It was a message from Ethan. "Can we talk?" My stomach dropped. I quickly shoved the phone back into my pocket, my heart racing. I couldn't do this. Not here, not now. But Claire noticed the change in my expression. "Lily, what's wrong?" I shook my head, trying to brush it off. "Nothing, just a message from work." She didn't seem convinced, but she let it go. Later that night, as I sat alone in the living room, I replayed the message over and over in my mind. Ethan wanted to talk, but what was there to say? He had crossed a line, and I had no intention of letting him cross it again. I ignored the message, hoping that would be the end of it. But Ethan didn't give up. Over the next few days, he kept messaging me, asking to meet, to talk. Each time, I ignored him, hoping he would get the message. But one evening, I heard a knock at the door. My heart skipped a beat as I opened it, and there he was, Ethan, standing on my doorstep with a look of determination in his eyes. "Can we talk, please?" he asked, his voice soft but insistent. I hesitated for a moment, but finally nodded. "Okay, but only for a few minutes." We sat down in the living room, the tension between us thick. I didn't know what to expect, but I braced myself for whatever was coming. "I'm sorry for what happened," Ethan began, his voice filled. "I'm sorry for what happened," Ethan began, his voice filled with regret. "I crossed a line and I shouldn't have. I don't know what I was thinking, but I need you to know that I never meant to hurt you." I looked at him, unsure of how to respond. His apology seemed sincere, but the damage had already been done. "Ethan, I appreciate your apology, but what you did was wrong. You put me in an impossible position. How am I supposed to look at your mother now? How am I supposed to carry this secret?" Ethan dropped his head, his face clouded with guilt. "I know. I was stupid. I don't know why I let things get so far, but I've realized that I have to stop. I'm sorry, Aunt Lily. I really am." I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of emotions inside me. "Ethan, I think the best thing for both of us is to move on. You need to take some time to think about what you did, and I need to figure out how to handle this, but I can't keep this secret forever." His eyes widened with fear. "Please, don't tell my mom. She'll never forgive me, and I'll lose everything." The weight of his plea pressed on me. I didn't want to hurt Claire, but I also couldn't bear the burden of this secret alone. "I won't say anything to her right now," I said softly, "but if this happens again, I'll have no choice. You need to think about the consequences of your actions, Ethan. It's time to grow up." He nodded slowly, understanding the gravity of my words. After a moment of silence, he stood up. "I'll leave you alone now. I really am sorry." As I watched him leave, I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. The situation was far from resolved, but at least for now, the tension was lifted. But deep down, I knew that the road to healing was only just beginning. The days that followed were quiet, but the guilt and uncertainty weighed heavily on my heart. I hadn't told Claire, But every time I saw her, I felt like a fraud. We had always been honest with each other, and now I was keeping this huge secret from her. One afternoon, Claire called me, her voice bright and cheerful. "Lily, we haven't had a girls' day in forever. How about we go out for coffee tomorrow? I miss catching up with you." My heart sank. How could I sit across from her, pretending everything was fine when her son had tried to make a move on me? But I couldn't avoid her forever. "Sure, Claire," I said, forcing a smile into my voice. "Coffee sounds great." The next day, we met at our favorite cafe. Claire was as bubbly as ever, chatting about her work, her hobbies, and Ethan's recent achievements, but I could barely focus on what she was saying. My mind kept drifting back to that night. "Lily, are you even listening?" Claire laughed, nudging me playfully. I snapped out of my thoughts, trying to keep up the facade. "Sorry, Claire. I'm just a little distracted today." Claire raised an eyebrow. "Is everything okay? You've been acting strange lately." I hesitated, my heart pounding in my chest. Should I tell her? Was it finally time to come clean? But the thought of shattering her world held me back. Claire adored Ethan. How could I tell her what he had done? "I'm fine," I lied, "just tired." But the guilt gnawed at me, and I knew I couldn't keep this up much longer. Over the next few weeks, I avoided Claire as much as I could. Every time she called, I made excuses, telling her I was busy or not feeling well. The truth was, I couldn't face her. The weight of the secret was too much to bear. One evening, as I sat alone in the living room, I thought about everything that had happened. Ethan had apologized, but the memory of that night still haunted me. I had kept silent to protect Claire, but in doing so, I was betraying her trust. I knew what I had to do. The next day, I called Claire and asked her to meet me for coffee. My heart raced as I waited for her at the cafe, my mind spinning with all the possible outcomes of our conversation. When Claire arrived, she greeted me with her usual warm smile. But as soon as she sat down, she noticed the tension in my face. "Lily, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I was about to say. "Claire, there's something I need to tell you. It's about Ethan." Her expression shifted from concern to confusion. "What about Ethan?" I hesitated, but I knew I couldn't back out now. "A few weeks ago, he came to my house. Daniel was out of town, and Ethan showed up late at night. At first, I didn't think anything of it, but then he crossed a line." Claire's face went pale. "What do you mean?" I swallowed hard, forcing myself to continue. "He tried to make a move on me, Claire. He said things that were inappropriate, and he kissed me." For a moment, Claire just stared at me, her face frozen in shock. Then, slowly, she shook her head. "No, Lily, that can't be right. Ethan would never—" "I wish it wasn't true," I said softly. "But it is. I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want to hurt you, but I couldn't keep this from you any longer." Tears welled up in Claire's eyes as she processed what I had just told her. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I didn't want to break your heart." Ethan apologized, and I thought maybe it was a one-time mistake, but I couldn't carry the guilt anymore. "You deserve to know the truth." Claire buried her face in her hands, sobbing quietly. I reached out to comfort her, but she pulled away, her voice trembling. "I need to go." Before I could say anything else, she stood up and walked out of the cafe, leaving me sitting there alone, my heart heavy with the weight of the confession. In the weeks that followed, I didn't hear from Claire. She stopped answering my calls, and I didn't see her at our usual places. The friendship we had, once cherished, seemed to crumble overnight, and I was left wondering if I had done the right thing. Ethan never contacted me again. I heard from a mutual friend that he had moved out of town for a while, but that was the last I heard about him. The silence was deafening, but I knew I had made the only choice I could. Keeping the truth from Claire would have been worse than telling her, even if it meant losing our friendship. One day, months after our conversation, I received a letter in the mail. It was from Claire. "I've thought about what you told me, and I've struggled to come to terms with it," she wrote. "It broke my heart, but I know you did the right thing by telling me the truth. I don't know if I can ever forgive Ethan for what he did, but I do forgive you. Maybe one day we can rebuild what we've lost." As I read her words, tears filled my eyes. I didn't know if things would ever be the same between us, but I was grateful for her forgiveness. The truth had been painful, but it had also been necessary. The moral: sometimes the truth is the hardest thing to share, especially when it means hurting the people we love. But keeping secrets can do even more damage. By choosing to speak up, even when it's uncomfortable, we allow healing to begin, both for ourselves and for those around us. Silence can often feel like the easiest choice, but in the end, honesty is what paves the way for forgiveness and new beginnings. If you were moved by this story, there's so much more to come. At Honest Confession, we bring you real, raw, and emotional stories that reveal the untold truths about relationships, betrayal, and personal growth. Every story is packed with drama, life lessons, and moments that will leave you thinking long after the video ends. Subscribe now and join a growing community that values honesty, courage, and the power of truth. Don't miss out. Hit the notification bell to be the first to hear our latest confessions and stories. There's always more to uncover. Till I see you again in my next story, goodbye.